God, I enjoyed that session with Willie here this afternoon. When I hear her talk, especially with the trials and tribulations she had with that old man of hers, can't help but think about my own condition. I mean, the wife that I have is the wife that I started with in this trip down the lane of active alcoholism, and after 31 years, she's still with me. I didn't have as much trouble in getting her trained as Willie did. After I had my debacle of 2 years of sobriety and went out and drank again, and I came back, my wife was very fortunate. She got inserted into Al-Anon, and thank God for that. Of course, it ultimately messed up my playpen because she began to find out what it was she was up against, and she wouldn't put up with my lies and stuff, even in my sobriety. So I'm forever grateful for Al-Anon for what they've done for our family. Now, we're at step number 10 in this recovery process, and as Willie alluded to, you see, the recovery process has taken place. We have inserted in our way of thinking the ideas of that will enable us to live day to day without alcohol. Because what have we done? Well, we've recognized the problem in step number 1 as being powerless over alcohol. Our lives are unmanageable. We have found the solution as being a belief in a power greater than ourselves, which will restore us the ability to have rational thoughts. Based on that information, we made a decision to pursue that solution that was found in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then we began to uncover and discover those things about us which had been blocking us from the solution through steps 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we began to get right with our fellow man and make restitution and begin to make restitution and amends through steps 8 and 9. And now step 10 is a step which says, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Unfortunately, I'm up here talking about step 10 before Charlie and Joe have had an opportunity to take it out of the big book, sort of lay the path out for this thing, because there's such a wealth of good information in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous about this step, and I certainly don't want to touch on it because Charlie and Joe do such a grand job of it. But it's in that piece of literature which reminds me or tells me that I have reached that recovery point in which step 10 is the beginning of a lifelong practice of doing everything that I have done up to that time in terms of recovery. Only now I do it on a daily basis. And they will point out to us in a paragraph in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, when we do a review on a daily basis, how we are in fact bringing in those other steps into the review. So I don't want to get into that. It was in that step in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous that I did find out that there's a code, and Alcoholics Anonymous has a code, and I didn't know that. It's not, the code of the West and the code of this, that, and the other thing. And Alcoholics Anonymous has its code, and it's a very simple thing called love and tolerance of others. And there's about 2 pages in the big book, but it's just full of great information about step 10. But I'm going to talk about step 10 coming from the position of the 12 and 12. And in my book, this starts on page 88. Here again, there's a wealth of information in this 12 and 12 about step 10. I'm going to talk very heavy about the types of inventory, the spot, the daily, and the annual or semi-annual house cleaning. But, and I like the way Willie closed that thing with that enthusiasm that we reach when we get to that point in our recovery process of step 9, when those promises are laid out to us. And, by this stage or by this time in the process, we are beginning to feel pretty good about life. And then we begin to be reinserted into the mainstream of life, and this is a step that we will begin to really enhance and broaden the spiritual life that we've entered into. We've entered into the realm of the Spirit, I think the book says. And this is the process in which we're going to begin to fine-tune. We're going to begin to live life on a daily basis, and then we're going to begin to enhance our spiritual progress in step 11. And then we're going to perhaps operate on God's will in step 12 by having a spiritual awakening and practice principles and carrying the message. But this is the beginning of all of that. And I think Charlie and Joe will also hit on this idea, because a lot of people like to refer to these next 3 steps as maintenance steps. They're not maintenance steps. We don't want to maintain what we've got when we're here, because we want everything to get better, bigger, and better in terms of their spiritual growth. But there's some good information here, and I hope that I have an opportunity to cover it before this hour is over with, and we go out and eat that good steak that we're supposed to have. As we work the first 9 steps, we prepare ourselves for the adventure of a new life. I'm going to try not to read so fast this afternoon, okay? My tongue gets in the way and my lips start quivering, so I don't want to do that. So let me just kind of slow up. If we make it, we make it. If you got your book, you can go over this stuff too. But when we approach step 10, we commence to put our AA way of living to practical use day by day, in fair weather or foul. And then comes the acid test. Can we stay sober, keep an emotional balance, and live in good purpose under all conditions? That's what we're after, isn't it? As an active alcoholic, there was always some reason or another that I could get drunk. If I had a bad day, that was a reason. If it was a good day, it was a reason. If it was Monday, it was a reason. If it was Saturday, it was a reason. If it was payday, it was a reason. And I used to especially like calamity in my life, because it gave me the excuse that everybody could accept for my drinking. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, this step is saying that now that we have what we have, can we put it to use in good times and bad times? And that is the real test, because you see, life is going to be going on. Life is life, and it's full of calamity. It's full of setbacks. And it's full of those things that we as human beings have to put up with, but yet at the same time, Alcoholics Anonymous gives us an opportunity to live a joyful and a free and a sober, serene, peaceful life. And I think that that's what we really are after anyway. By this time, most of us have gotten a touch of that, and it feels pretty good. I know to me it feels a lot better than chaos. It feels a lot better than wondering where I am or where I've been. Serenity and peace of mind is so much better than all of that stuff. And I have begun to experience some of that, because let's just assume that I have done the first 9 steps pretty much following the dictates of this book. And I did when I came back into Alcoholics Anonymous February 1st, 1975, and got with this fantastic sponsor of mine up here, who made sure that I got sober the AA way. And by the time I reached this point, I've had a glimpse of this serenity and peace of mind. And some of these promises are coming true. And I'm beginning to smile a little bit. And I'm beginning to do some of that laughing that Willie's talking. I love to laugh and have a good time. And it feels a lot better. And it's a sincere, hearty laugh sometimes. And it hadn't been that for a while. I've just been laughing at some of them dirty jokes, which I'm still subject to do. I've heard a few this weekend, by the way. Jesus is going to get you. I like that. I like that one. A continuous look at our assets and liabilities and a real desire to learn and grow by this means are necessities for us. Now, that's a pretty strong word. They are necessities for us. This is something that apparently this alcoholic needs to do. We alcoholics have learned this the hard way. More experienced people, of course, at all times and places, have practiced unsparing self-survey and criticism. For the wise have always known that no one can make much of his life until self-searching becomes a regular habit, until he is able to admit and accept what he finds, and until he patiently and persistently tries to correct what is wrong. So we're going to try to create a habit which is really, for this guy, foreign to his way of thinking, until such time as he came into Alcoholics Anonymous and began this journey that Willie talked about. And that now I want to develop a habit. Now I wouldn't know if I would not know that that's what I want to do or need to do unless I got in touch with the literature of Alcoholics Anonymous. Sitting in meetings, sometimes you may not hear that. That's why I think that what we do in these seminars and what I'm privileged to sit around and hear is that the directions are here. They're in black and white. There need not be any mystery as to how to get sober. And it doesn't cost any money, contrary to some popular beliefs. When a drunk has a terrific hangover because he drank heavily yesterday, he cannot live well today. But there's another kind of hangover that we can have, and this is an emotional hangover. which is the result of yesterday and sometimes today's excesses of negative emotions, anger, fear, jealousy, and the like. If we would live serenely today and tomorrow, we certainly need to eliminate emotional hangovers. This doesn't mean we need to wander morbidly around in the past. It requires an admission and correction of errors now. I've underlined now about 3 or 4 times. Admissions and corrections of errors now. See, as we have seen in this first 9 steps, we have taken care of all the garbage and gobbledygook of the past. We have shed that shell now. We are reborn. We are new people, and so that we don't have to accumulate the garbage that got us in all the trouble to begin with. We will now address the issues as they come up. We don't have to longer worry about the guilt of the past and the anxieties of the future. We just go through life using this particular step as a guide to develop and form a new habit for the new life. And here it goes to say, our inventory enabled us to settle with the past, and when this is done, we're really able to leave it behind us. Good information, could be debated. When our inventory is carefully taken and we have made peace with ourselves, the conviction follows that tomorrow's challenges can be met as they come, and that's it. That's exactly what we want to do. Now that we have a partner in life, a spiritual guide, so to speak, that the challenges now we can meet those. We're not, we hear it in AA, and one of our slogans is we're not alone anymore. We're never alone. Although all inventories are alike in principle, and we've talked enough about an inventory to know what it is, the timing of the time factor distinguishes one from another. There's a spot check inventory which is taken any time of the day. Any time of the day. Whenever we find ourselves getting a little messed up. And there's the one at the day's end, in which I like to use to review the day and to go over the first 9 steps, and see if I need to do anything and to take any actions to clear up that day's activities. And then there's the ones that we take occasionally when we go off alone in the company of a sponsor, so-called spiritual retreats, etc., etc. So those are the 3 types of inventories that Step 10 and the 12 and 12 talks about. Now, we say, why so much emphasis on inventory? Well, the emphasis on inventory is heavy only because a great many of us have never really acquired the habit of accurate self-appraisal, and that's what we're doing. See, I think that we're moving from a mode where we used to, or at least I used to, blame people, places, and things and everybody else for my trouble, to now beginning to develop a habit in which if there's trouble in my life, I began to look at John Williams to find out what it is that I did that might have caused this, or what I can do to alleviate the problem, and to get out of that chaotic situation, to get back into that peace and serenity that I've had a touch of, and that I know feels a lot better than chaos. Once this healthy practice has been grooved, it will be so interesting and profitable that the time it takes won't be missed. So it's not a time-consuming thing. Its rewards are great. Its rewards are great. To bring into the mind of a store clerk sometimes, you ought to watch him. Especially if you go shopping late in the evening and you go in a store and you know you're dealing with a clerk who's been there for about 6 or 7 hours and she's just ready to throw the cash register at you. And there's a little problem, and you say, "Oh, that's right. I know you probably had a tough day. Just take your time, no problem." And they just don't know how to act because you're about the third one in line, and the other 2 ahead of you have been just snippy and ornery as hell. And then you come in and say something nice. That's kind of nice. Just to watch that reaction, it is rewarding to be nice. And I never was nice, but alcoholics are nice people. Okay, and then let's start talking about a spot check inventory on page 90. But before we do that, let's look at the kind of a setting that an inventory can do its work. Here's a very good piece of information on page 90 in my 12 and 12. I don't know what page it is in yours. That reminds me of something I wanted to do for you. Anybody here got the 2nd edition of the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous? 2nd edition. On page 73, Charlie reminded me of this because he apparently was reading out of a 2nd edition. In the middle of that page down in the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous, I want to bring this to you. There's a typographical error in the second edition of the Big Book. That is it in the third? Okay. It says now we're about a little just beyond halfway down. It says, as far as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. The word was mistranscribed from the original. It's supposed to be as fast as he can. I saw a third edition in which they got fast in there, but the second edition that I have has far in there, and that typographical error found by somebody who belongs to a study group, who is a real nitpicker, I guess. But I just thought I'd pass that along to you. I just thought about it. Just a little typography. You may impress your friends at your home group when you get home. Page 73 of the Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. The second edition says, as far as he can. Just think about that. You can see that. Okay, it should be fast. Okay. Well, I don't know when they caught it, but it's just a little typographical error. Now let's get back to what I'm supposed to be doing here. I'm not supposed to be an editor. Step 10, here's something that's very important. I guess that's what made me think about that. It's a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with us. Now, you know that's kind of hard sometimes, a hard pill for us alcoholics to swallow and to get used to and to really buy into. And I don't think it's any kind of self-flagellation that we're beating ourselves over the head because we accept the responsibility of an emotional disturbance in our life. But by God, it sure does make things easier if we start looking at us. I'm talking about peace and serenity is a lot better than chaos and being upset. Every time there's a disturbance, there's something wrong with us. If somebody hurts us and we are sore, we're in the wrong also. But is there no exception to the rule? What about justifiable anger? Anybody know what justifiable anger is? Oh, God. That's the only anger I knew before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. The only time I ever got angry is because I was justified to be that way. So, and here we're talking about action and reaction. And buddy, that's, here again, we're at the beginning of a lifetime of practice in which we're going to get better at this. And maybe the first time we approach this and start getting in the habit of daily appraisal and self-appraisal, et cetera, we're not going to be as good as we are when we've done it a while. I mean, that just makes sense to me. It's the same. I'm always amazed when I go to an airport and see one of these big 747s. That thing don't even look like it ought to fly, but it does. And you go out there and you see that thing, and then first thing you know, 300-400 people come in there and they sit down, and you think about all them people and how much they weigh. And then 3 or 4 of these guys, all snappy looking, they'll come out there and they'll jump in that thing and they'll start that bugger up and it'll taxi out and it'll go up in the air. I have never ever been able to figure out how that thing flies. I've flown in one before, but I just never could figure it out. Well, I got to thinking, well, those guys just didn't walk out of that airport and just jump in that airplane and start flying. They probably started out in a training session somewhere, or maybe with a Piper Cub, and maybe with piston engines, and then maybe they got into a jet with single engine, and then maybe double engines. And hell, they worked themselves up into that big old deal. And that's the same way I look at sobriety. I just didn't jump in here and understand and know all these things like I know them today. It's a progress. It's an evolution of understanding. It's a communication with a written word that we have, and then putting this stuff into practice and testing it. I'm an alcoholic, and when I look at this stuff, sometimes I can agree with it, but I say, I don't know whether it's going to work or not. And the only way I'm going to find out is to go out and put it to the test. And I'll say, yes, it does. I mean, we can all fly them big 747s if we want to start in the beginning and develop the understanding and knowledge. And then we get to be pretty good at it. Those guys go out there and fly that thing without thinking about it. Just like driving an automobile. I remember when I first started driving an automobile. Well, I do a lot better at that today than I did then. I don't run over curbs, and they have automatics. Today I started with a clutch, and it used to go, and my brother was trying to teach me to drive, and I thought I was going to kill both of us. But it was strange, you see. It was a new thing. you grind the gears and you run off the road and you make it shake a lot, but you eventually get the hang of it. That's the way this program is. So don't be surprised if you're not working it perfect the first time you attempt it. Nobody does. So don't be too tough on yourself. Few people have been more victimized by resentments than have we alcoholics. I agree with that. It mattered little whether a resentment was justified or not. A burst of temper could spoil a day, and a well-nursed grudge could make us miserably ineffective. Nor were we ever skillful in separating justified from unjustified anger. As I said a while ago, all mine was always justified. As we saw it, there they go. Anger, that occasional luxury of more balanced people, could keep us on an emotional jag indefinitely. The emotional dry benders often led straight to the bottle. Other kinds of disturbances, jealousy, envy, self-pity, or hurt pride did the same thing, led us to the bottle. A spot check inventory taken in the midst of such disturbances can be a very great help in quieting stormy emotions. Here again is, what do you want? Do you want to be in stormy emotions? Do you want life to be chaotic? Or do you want to follow the instructions and perhaps tap into some of this peace and serenity that we know is available? Some of those folks around me, when I came in and I didn't have any, I could tell they had some. And they kept saying, this is how I got it. And I figured, well, if I want to get it, I got to do what they did. I've got to follow the instructions. The quick inventory is aimed at our daily ups and downs, especially where people or new events throw us off balance and tempt us to make mistakes. In all these situations, we need self-restraint, honest analysis of what is involved, a willingness to admit when a fault is ours, and an equal willingness to forgive when the fault is elsewhere. That's very important, too. I've learned to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's pretty good today. And I've had a tough time doing that at home. Seems like I practice my program least at home, where I probably ought to practice the most than anywhere else. But that's my hang-up, and I'm working very hard on it. We need not be discouraged when we fall into the error of our old ways, for these disciplines are not easy. And that's what I've been trying to point out. Don't beat yourself up just because you find out you're a human being. And I think it's already been alluded to. And I found myself doing this for a long time in sobriety. And I would say, I'd do something wrong, and you know what I'd come out with? I said, what do you expect? I'm an alcoholic. I did that for a long time until I got the sponsor that I had got me by the nape of the neck one day and reminded me that I could no longer blame my activities and character defects, et cetera, on alcohol. You're just a human being, John. You have human frailties. You have faults that you're going to be working on for the rest of your life. Quit blaming that on alcohol and accept the responsibility of who you are. But I was one who would be very easy to say, what do you expect? I'm an alcoholic, because that's a cop-out. Down at the bottom of page 91, we're talking about sidestepping some of these traps that we can fall into that will get us into those emotional hang-ups. And here's a word I like in here. When we are tempted by the bait, we should train ourselves to step back and think. Now, I know about training. I was thinking about training when Willie mentioned the Dallas Cowboys, When those guys walk out on the field this Sunday to play a football game or this weekend to play a football game, it'll be the first regular season. But they've been working on that for some time. They have been in training so that tomorrow they'll be sharp and in tune and be able to pass the ball and score some touchdowns and do all them good things they're supposed to do. But this is the way spiritual life, to me at least, it seems that I have to do that. I have to train myself to think new thoughts. And it is a process that's an evolution, and it's an ongoing process to train myself so that I know, and I don't have any illusions about this coming to me by my just sitting around in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and waiting for something to happen. It don't happen that way. Training takes energy and effort, and this book tells me that in order to have the ability to have self-appraisal, that I have to train myself to do that. That's work. That's action. Disagreeable and unexpected problems are not the only ones that call for self-control. We must be quite as careful when we begin to achieve some measure of importance and material success. For no people have ever loved personal triumphs more than we have loved them. We drank of success as of a wine which could never fail to make us feel elated. When temporary good fortune came our way, we indulged ourselves in fantasies and still greater victories over people and circumstances. Thus, blinded by prideful self-confidence, we are apt to play the big shot. Of course, people turned away from us, bored or hurt. You know, I have had the problem, too, in sobriety, to having some material success. And when I would tell other people about it, I remember one guy really embarrassed me one time. Said, "It sounded to me like you becoming an eye expert." Because I kept talking about how I had done this and how I had done that, and how I was this and I was that. Said, "You're becoming to sound like you're an eye specialist." And then, of course, I knew what he was saying then. And I was beginning to take credit for a lot of things. Now that we're in AA and sober and winning back the esteem of our friends and business associates, we find that we still need to exercise a special vigilance. As an insurance against big shotism, we can often check ourselves by remembering that we are today sober only by the grace of God, and that any success we may be having is far more His success than ours. And God, that is true. And I also think, you know, I think it's all right if you're successful in sobriety. If you're materially successful in sobriety, there ain't nothing wrong with it. Go for it. Don't put yourself down. We're not supposed to wear robes and sandals and give it all away. I don't think that's what we're after. If we can always put it in the proper perspective and remember that we are only where we are and have only what we have as a result of God's good graces, then I don't think God will be good to us, I believe. I believe that perhaps some of us are supposed to be prosperous. I don't happen to be one of them, but apparently some of us are supposed to be, because there's some who are waxing pretty good, and that's okay. And but don't feel bad if you get successful. Enjoy it. If you're spiritual and following these spiritual principles, I guarantee you that money will be used to the best effort. There ain't no doubt about it. You may be getting it all, but you're probably just being a channel to make sure that it's used in the proper method. I just don't have any doubt about that if you acquire it using spiritual principles. Finally, we began to see here, I love this paragraph. This puts things in perspective on page 92. Finally, we began to see that all people, now it doesn't say some people, or 78% of them. It says all people, including ourselves. You know, when they talk about all people, I'm a people, I'm all, I'm one of them, are to some extent emotionally ill as well as frequently wrong, and when we approach true tolerance and see what real love for our fellows actually means. I pointed that out to my wife one time, let her know that she fell into that category. It will become more and more evident as we go forward that it is pointless to become angry or to get hurt by people who, like us, are suffering from the pains of growing up. That's good information to know. It has an awful lot, at least for my sake, it determines the means by which I react to other people. And I have used this bit of information a lot of times to bring myself up short, because I have a tendency to want to jump right back to where I used to be and take issue with and argue with and be right all the time. And I found out that I don't have to be right all the time. And I found out that all people, not just the ones in Alcoholics Anonymous, perhaps are emotionally sick. All we need to do is just take a quick inventory of the people we see around us all the time. There's an awful lot of people that I know that are probably more emotional sick than I ever was in my drinking. That they are perhaps corrupt people. Maybe they are excessively greedy. And I really have come to the conclusion that I'd rather have gone through my alcoholism than have my thinking today than they never were alcoholics and they have what they got. See, they don't have a chance of turning around and redirecting their lives. They're not going to reach that devastating point in their life where they're going to have to say, something's got to be done here. I can't go on this way like I had to reach. They're going to go on through life, a lot of them being miserable, but not all of them. But all people are to some extent emotionally ill. And I got to treat them like I want to be treated. And I got to consider that and realize that when somebody snaps at me. And I think Willie pointed this out. You know, they may be having a bad day too. My wife has bad days. A lot of times they run into bad weeks, bad months, and it can be ongoing. I've learned patience and tolerance. I go to Al-Anon meetings with her to make sure she goes to Al-Anon meetings. Check and see if they're talking about the right stuff. No, not really. I'm only kidding. But I remember that a lot of times when it's easy, you know, my wife and I can get into heated discussions about things, and my family too. And I can feel myself heading towards that, ready to stomp my finger down and listen to me. I'm your husband, or I'm your father. Da da da. I am right. And then I catch myself. Wait a minute, God, you came from that. You don't want that anymore. You can't live that way anymore. It's okay. They are human beings. They may be right or they may be wrong. Let them have their way. Get the heck out of the way. And here again, I like serenity and peace of mind a lot better than I like chaos. And what do I want out of life? It is not anger. It is not agitation. I can get into agitation. As a matter of fact, if I wanted to, I'd get us all agitated real fast right here. I'm good at getting agitation going. I could bring up some things that would have this room divided. Half of you'd be on that side, and the other half I'd be a referee and watching the fight. I could do that. But and I've been party to that. I've been on one side of the room or the other because I've seen how people can agitate you. The idea that we can be possessively loving of a few, can ignore the many, and can continue to fear or hate anybody has to be abandoned, if only a little at a time. But it's got to be abandoned. I mean, you can chip away at it, but it's certainly got... I can no longer be selective. We can try to stop making unreasonable demands upon those we love. I need that admonition right now. I need to hear that, and I need to communicate with this book. We can show kindness where we had shown none. With those we dislike, we can begin to practice justice and courtesy, perhaps going out of our way to understand and help them. Whenever we fail in any of these people, we can promptly admit it. To ourselves always. So that's first, forgive yourself. And to them also with the admission, when the admission would be helpful. Courtesy, kindness, justice, and love are the keynotes. Okay, these are keynotes. The code is mentioned in the big book. It's love and tolerance of others. Basically the same thing. By which we may come into harmony with practically anybody. If you are walking around with these ideas in your heart, uppermost in your mind, to be courteous, to be kind, to be just, and to love all, you cannot help but have a pretty good day. But if you're walking around with anxieties and fear and hate and dislike and vengefulness in your heart, it's tough to be nice. And I guarantee you're going to create some chaos somewhere. You're like a tornado rolling through somebody's life. You may be sober as a judge, but you're gonna cause some trouble. First time somebody says, "Well, I hope you have a nice day," and you say, "Mind your own damn business," or "Don't tell me what to do." You mean that's the reaction from that kind of a thinking. If you're thinking positive thoughts and you're in tune with that power source, say, "Well, thanks, that's good. You have a good one too." And that's so much better than that other. Okay. When in doubt, we can always pause, saying, "Not my will, but thine be done." And there's a prayer. And we can often ask ourselves, am I doing to others as I would have them do to me? That's not strange, is it? I mean, this is a philosophy which we hear that comes from the golden rule, perhaps out of a religious doctrine, but this makes sense. That is a pretty good way to conduct oneself. It's a pretty good, our slogans are pretty good. There ain't no doubt about that, but this is one I like to run around in my head. It should be up there in my little computer, ready to be surfaced at all times when I have to make a decision, when I have to measure a relationship or something that's about to occur. Am I doing to others as I would have them do to me? Or is it the old do it to them before they do it to you. I mean, that's where I came from. And that can create chaos. This creates harmony in life. Okay, now we're going to talk about the daily inventory. When evening comes, perhaps just before going to sleep, and I do this, I follow the instructions personally from the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. There's a paragraph which is included in step 11 in that deal. It says, when we retire at night, I retire every night. And that book is telling me exactly what I should do. And then the next paragraph, when I wake up in the morning, there's that book again. It says, on awakening each morning, we think about 24 hours ahead. These are my daily directions. This is, I don't have to buy one of them books, what do they call them, 24-hour books. I go through that every day. I'll never tire of that, hopefully. They give me the instructions on what to do when I get up in the morning, and they tell me how I review a day every day. When evening comes, perhaps just before going to sleep, many of us draw up a balance sheet for a day. And I don't do no writing on this. A lot of people do this. I did do some writing with it because my sponsor gave me a list of a pad of sheets for daily inventory, just to get in the habit. Just to get in the habit, because I can just tell that when I started this, if I hadn't had these sheets just to write check marks, it was a pretty simple thing to do. But if I hadn't had those, I'd have laid my head on the pillow and said, well, what the hell, I got this far. Everything's all right. Good night. And I'd have gone on out. And I wouldn't have really thought too much about it. But this sheet made me really think about anger, fear, and also it had a negative side, and it also had a positive side. So I wouldn't do too tough on myself. And here it mentions the poor day indeed when we haven't done something right. Even when we have tried hard and failed, we may chalk that up as the greatest credit of all. And that's talking about something we hear in our lifetime, especially in sales, et cetera, about failure and so on and so forth. To have done nothing and fail, that's bad. But to at least have tried and failed, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Someone who knew what he was talking about once remarked that pain was the touchstone of all spiritual progress. How heartily we AAs can agree with him, for we know that the pains of drinking had to come before sobriety and emotional turmoil before serenity. It's just that way, isn't it? It's always darkest before the dawn. And when we say there are no dues or fees for this deal, all we have to do is think about the last few weeks, months, or years before we entered into Alcoholics Anonymous, and buddy, we have paid the dues. We had to go through that, and that's how sometimes we in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've been guilty of this, sometimes prevent or attempt to prevent someone who doesn't really want to get sober. We attempt to prevent him from his right to suffer. Man, if you can't help them up, go ahead and help them down. They got to reach it. They got to reach that point of desperation before they can surrender. There's a price has to be paid for this sobriety, and emotional turmoil comes before serenity. This is, we do go through an emotional ringer sometimes going through these 12 steps, as we have to wrench our mind and bring up thoughts of things that occurred as we take our inventory and as we make a list of people I can remember gulping many times as I made that 8-step list of people that I owed money to. Man, I would in no shape, way, or whatever to pay people back. I mean, I couldn't pay mortgages, pay obligations for automobiles, and I was sitting there looking at that list of debts I had. That hurt. And it was a pain that I had to pay, because when I started making those amends, God, it felt good. It really felt fantastic to gnaw away or to chip away at these things and finally get them behind you. But it's the emotional turmoil that was paid before I had any semblance of serenity. Okay, let's see. Let me go ahead and go through this. As we glance down the debt side of today's ledger, we should carefully examine our motives in each thought or act that appears to be wrong. In most cases, our motives won't be hard to see and understand. When prideful, angry, jealous, anxious, or fearful, we acted accordingly, and that was that. That's what I meant. When we got those things in our heart, that's the way we're going to act. If that's what we're thinking, that's what we're going to do. And anything, I heard this from a Texas guy, P. He said, anything you put between you and your God becomes your God. And I understood what he was talking about. Because at the time I was pursuing something hot and heavy materially. And that's all I was obsessed with the thought of doing that. Whatever it was. That was more important. And I just, and I can get locked into something like that and I can forget about spirituality and love and tolerance of others. I can forget it real fast. Because I'm a human being. Not that I'm an alcoholic, I'm just a human being. And I have those basic God-given instincts, one of which is material security, which can just be bingo. It can go right off the meter. And I can find myself locked into that. Okay. But in other instances, only the closest scrutiny will reveal what our true motives were. There are cases where our ancient enemy, rationalization, has stepped in and has justified conduct which was really wrong. Remember the story of the cowboy that picked up the horseshoe? He was an expert at rationalizing. I could do that. I used to wake up in the bathtub a lot when I was drinking. And I had no idea how I wound up there. But I was a fast thinker. When my wife came in and found me, she was about to sit down there. He spotted me over in the bathtub and said, "What are you doing in here?" And I said, "Well, I got sick last night and I didn't want to stray too far, so I decided to sleep in the bathtub." Sounded normal. Or I'd wind up sprawled on the front porch and she'd come out and find me there. Because I don't think I could find my key, and if I could have found it, I'd never found the hole. And I'd wind up just passed out on the stoop outside. And she'd come out there, and I'd think, I said, "Honey, I couldn't find the key last night, and I didn't want to wake anybody up, so I just decided to stay out here. You woke up." I could justify the stupidity of my actions. I was an expert at it. I wasn't so good to begin with because I used to stammer a lot, but I got good at it as time went on. I could justify the stupidity of my actions. So when I do things wrong today, I have to spot check. Man, don't rationalize your way out of this. Accept the responsibility of your actions. That's part of the maturing, the maturation process that I've been able to find in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was emotionally insecure when I got here. I was probably the mentality of a child, and nobody turned on a light switch and made all of this better. It's an evolution. It's a process. But it's possible. I can verify that as a result of these steps. That's the only thing that I know that I have been doing intently for the last little bit of time, and that's the only place I can give credit for it. Nothing I've done. I didn't figure this thing out. The temptation's here to imagine that we have good motives and reasons when we really don't, and then they give us an example. I love these. And I know nobody in Canada is guilty of these things, but down in Florida we have some folks that'll do these things, see? So I can identify with them. We constructively criticize someone who needed it. When our real motive was to win a useless argument. Or the person concerned not being present, we thought we were helping others to understand him. Now let me tell you about James, see? When in actuality our true motive was to feel superior by pulling him or her down. We sometimes hurt those we love because they need to be taught a lesson. I'm an expert at that. When we really want to punish. Think about this. We were depressed and complained we felt bad when in fact we were mainly asking for sympathy and attention. I'm guilty of this about 10 days ago. I got to tell you that. I'm still guilty of that. I can do that. I needed a rest, and I needed to be left alone for a while, so I feigned a little illness. And my wife felt sorry for me. And says, "Why don't you go lay down and maybe you'll feel better after a while." And I did. I finally confessed that I got guilty about it. That's another thing about Alcoholics Anonymous and working these steps. There's some things that in your first few weeks or months you can almost do and not bat an eye. But as you're gaining in spirituality and trying to do the right things, there's some things that you used to be able to do even in sobriety that you can't do no more. I mean, you really get a sharp, definitive answer between right and wrong, and man, you just can't tolerate. Hell, I used to be able to lie even in sobriety real good. I can't do that anymore. Things happen. I mean, I'm overwhelmed by it. And I thank God for that. There's a lot of things that I used to be able to do even in sobriety that as a result of working this spiritual program and doing these things, I can't tolerate them anymore. And I've heard others sober a lot longer than me, have even said to me, John, how can you do that? I said, well, it don't bother me. And then they say, well, I can understand because there's going to come a time, John, when you're not going to be able to do those things. You're not going to be able to tolerate it. They're not compatible with the way you're trying to live today. They're not compatible with a spiritual way of life. And we have these built-in things. We talk about intuitive thoughts and some of the promises. The odd trait of mind and emotion, this perversive wish to hide a bad motive underneath a good one, permeates human affairs from top to bottom. The subtle and elusive kind of self-righteousness can underlie the smallest act or thought. Learning daily to spot, admit, and correct these flaws is the essence of character building and good living. Learning daily to spot, admit, and correct is the essence of character building and good living. An honest regret for harms done, a genuine gratitude for blessings received, and a willingness to try for better things tomorrow will be the permanent assets we shall seek. Seek. It doesn't say we have them. We're going to seek them. Having so considered our day, not admitting to take due note of things well done, and having searched our hearts with neither fear nor favor, we can truly thank God for the blessings we have received and sleep in good conscience. If that's not happening to you today, God, I'd be glad when it does, because it's so good. Serenity and peace of mind is so much better than chaos. And it's so much better than walking around with a football in your stomach. Room this size with this many people, there's one or two in here that's got a football in their stomach. They don't have to do that. They can get with somebody, talk about it, spot it. They'll be probably suggested that they get with that higher power or take whatever actions necessary to alleviate the football in the stomach. Because it ain't no fun to have a football in your stomach. We talked about humility a little bit, and I was remembering today when somebody was talking, and I remember that As Bill Sees It, he wrote a good definition of perfect humility, and this is, we never reach this, but this is something worth striving for, and it's a willingness at all time and all places to do the will of God. If you can walk around with that program in your mind all the time, you come a long way from that scared, anxious person into that crawl perhaps into Alcoholics Anonymous, and to walk around and say, man, it's kind of nice to be willing at all times and all places to try to do the will of God. And so that's where we get when we get to step 10. And step 11, we're going to learn that, things are going so good and life is so great and this power source is so good that we're worth knowing better, and then the book's going to tell us how we can get to know this power source better. And let me just close by saying something that I picked up somewhere, probably in a little pamphlet somewhere, and I've adapted it to sobriety. Sobriety, not my responsibility, but my response to God's ability, and that's what it's all about. Thank you very much. We've got about 7 or 8 minutes. Anybody want to comment on step 10? Be glad to have them at this time. I think we're going to break at 5 and have a cookout. I know somebody's got some experience in continuing to do the things that we do. I know that 6 or 7 minutes is probably not enough time for all of us, but well, nobody's really stammering to the mic. We can always count on Felix. Come on, Felix. Thank God you're here. Hi, Felix.
I tend to dominate sometimes meetings too because I like to talk. And I usually like to talk from within, from my own feelings and experiences. And step 10 is one thing that in the beginning I used to use as a sleeping pill at night. I'd go over the day and see what happened through the day. If there was anything that happened that I had to correct or make amends to, I'd try and record it in my mind and make the amends the following day. And at the end of that, I'd think of the nice things that happened that particular day, no matter how small, and I would concentrate on that particular thing, and this would give me a pleasant thought on my mind, and somewhere in there I would fall asleep. So my mind had a pleasant thing on dominating it, and I would be at peace with myself with pleasantness, and I would sleep well and peaceful and wake up refreshed and rested. Whereas before I attempted to do this, I'd have that wretchedness running around up there, and I'd worry about, dying from lack of sleep sort of thing, and not being able to sleep. But since coming here last year and listening to you people on the steps in the 10th step, there was an incident that happened to me after going back home again, and at work. There were some incidents happened at work, and the security was involved in it, and there were some reprimands handed out. And I, being on the union executive, I approached the chief of security and spoke my mind to him, and resulted in a reprimand to myself. And when this incident happened, there was the security guard, myself, and another person there who was in trouble from the incident, and there was just the three of us there. So a few days later, I got presented with a reprimand, and I found out from the security that it wasn't them that complained to the personnel, and I knew it wasn't me. So I blamed the third party that was there, who happened to be the daughter of the secretary to the personnel manager. And I proceeded to talk to a couple of other people about this, being very resentful of the fact that I had channeled some information to this person to try and help them with their predicament, and they turned around and got me branded and labeled, and had a letter put in my file that I didn't wish to be there. So this created a resentment, and I proceeded to share this with a couple of my fellow workers and putting the blame on this individual. And later I found out that this was not so, that she had talked to her mother about it, and her mother told the personnel manager, and the personnel manager took action, and I felt pretty bad about it. So the way you explained it, step 10 there, I had to do 4, 5, and 8, 9 in there. So I went to this person, and I told her, I says, what I had done and how I had wrongfully branded her. And I asked her for forgiveness, and I got it. And then I had to go back to the people that I had shared this resentment with and told them the nature of my wrongs, that I had wrongfully accused this person, and this person should not to be blamed, and I have to make amends. I explained to them what I was trying to do, that for my own peace of mind, I had to go around and try and correct the wrong that I had done. And it was only through this big book study here that I had learned how to do this. Like, I wasn't doing step 10 as it really reads it in the book. I was using it as like I said, a sleeping pill, or to ask for help for other people or whatever. And maybe at times I'd go and say I'm sorry to somebody, and that was the end of it. But I found here, and I felt real good after I had done this in this fashion. And it also gave me a better communication with my fellow workers as far as being open and sincere and honest about whatever was at hand at the time. So I just wanted to share that with you, because this happened from the last time I was here. Thanks again.
Thanks, Stephen. One thing that step 10 taught me also was that I could use the 12 steps of recovery on any problem in my life. I could operate those 12 steps on anything. I don't care what it was. That I could recognize the problem, know what the solution is, decide to pursue it or decide to get rid of the problem. I could inventory it. I could talk to somebody about it. Take an attitude of willingness and humbly asking. If I needed to, I could inventory it for amends. Any problem, I found out in step 10, can be addressed this way. Because I've seen it work. I've seen it work in people who have problems that of a personal nature. And this is a step that also taught me to go around taking a look at myself and saying, are you trusting God or are you not trusting God? I think about that. Just one of the keys that I throw in there. Do unto others. Are you trusting or are you not trusting? My conduct, I've been told this sometimes by a loving sponsor when he indicated to me, he says, John, he says, I can tell you what your problem is, because I was out of sorts. And he said, you're just not trusting God. He said, you probably would never say that, but that's what your actions dictate. And then I had to think and honestly appraise it and say, you know, you're absolutely right. And I was not trusting God. And I heard another pearl the other day that I thought was rather nice, having to do with the depth, the depth of one's anxiety is the measurement of his distance from God. You think about it. Okay. Are we going to have somebody close this because it's 5 o'clock and I like to stay right on this good. It's 4 o'clock. Okay, it's time for me to get the hell out of here. I know that much. I was fixing to go eat. Charlie, I'll stay and listen.